All right, guys, we are back. Another episode of Entrepreneur Hour. I've got a new friend here joining me today. And the irony in all of this is that I've literally spent the better part of today and probably the last few days racking my mind on marketing. And one of the things that I've had to realize is that, you know what, I was really good at sales. And I assumed when I came to the online space that would just translate over. And I'm realizing the online world is way more about marketing and way less about sales. So I've been having to kind of like accept the fact that I'm not as good at marketing as I was just naturally inclined at sales. And so I'm having to do the work and dig in and read about marketing psychology and all these various things. And so ironically, like I said, my guest today is a marketing expert. We've had quite a few of those folks come on. And I can tell people really jive with the marketing talk. So I assume other people have the same problem maybe that I have. And that's why they're tuning in. Without further ado, I'm welcoming Benjamin Shapiro to the show. How are you?
See you, Mitch. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, I was going to say Ben Shapiro because I'm so inclined to say that. We were just talking about that before, but
you can call me Ben.
I've seen you've had to go with the long form version of your name for reasons that there are other people out there in the world using the Ben Shapiro name.
Yeah, there's the political commentator, Ben Shapiro. And quick aside, he wrote a book called Porn Generation. Yeah, it's called Porn Generation. It was published when I was a junior in college, and he's I assume late 30s, early 40s, something like that.
Yeah, he's a young guy. Age.
Yeah. And he published this book. And of course, I was in a fraternity in college. Everybody in the fraternity saw Ben Shapiro, Porn Generation, and, were giving me a hard time, and people like leave a cover next to my bed, and the book is about basically how, my understanding, I never read the whole thing, but how kids in college are not paying enough attention to their schooling because all they want to do is get laid. Yeah. And of course, he took the stance that is bad, and he did it when I was a senior in college, when you can imagine what I was trying to do. Let's just say I'm not the biggest fan, and I don't care what his politics are. I wish he would just give me my name back. So
right now, yeah. So that was pretty young. That must have been before his political career then.
I think it was
about the same
kind
age.
Of launching. I honestly don't know all that much about him other than he's a big political pundit. But yeah, he's got my name, and so I go by Benjamin, or I write it Benjamin, but my brand is Ben J. Shap. And so if you're looking for anything me related, don't look for Ben Shapiro, look for Ben J. Shap.
But the interesting thing is maybe I'm mistaken, but I don't think I've come across another Shapiro in my life. I would think that was a pretty unique name. So the fact that
there's a ton of us. Yeah. OJ's lawyer was Robert Shapiro.
You're right. There was another Shapiro.
There's a lot of Shapiros, and there's a lot of Ben Shapiros. So other Ben Shapiros.
Yeah. It might be one of those things where you say you don't think about red cars until you start thinking about red cars, and then all of a sudden all you see is red cars, right?
Yeah.
So it might be those things like...
I've sat in a meeting with another Benjamin Shapiro.
Did you really?
Yeah, there's a sports marketing agency owner in San Francisco, and we had a meeting together, and people would say Ben, and we would both turn. They're like, no, Ben Shapiro, and we would both turn.
That's wild, man. I did not know that. All right, cool. So let's talk about you. You spent a long time in eBay, kind of have navigated other areas, startups, done a lot of consulting work. I'm gonna let you tell the story.
Yeah.
Give us kind of the 30,000 foot view of who you are, what you do.
I mean, if you want to go in the Wayback Machine, my dad was an orthopedic surgeon, which to me is the ultimate service-based business.
Yeah.
And, he ran his own practice. And so, a lot of where my sort of core skills and career came out of was understanding how to work with people, because I saw it as a kid, how my dad would treat people that were coming in with injuries. And so that is a lot of how I think about business. And even though I'm a marketer, and marketing is really about, crafting a message and a story that resonates with a lot of people, his personal approach and the skill set that he relies on is a lot of what I have, which is that interpersonal relationship. And that's how I ended up being a talking head and a podcast host. But like you mentioned, career-wise, I worked at eBay in business development for years, a lifetime in modern careers. I was there for 7 years. And I left because I wanted to do what the cool kids were doing, which is start their own startup and try to be Mark Zuckerberg. And so I launched a guitar lesson website called strumschool.com, and, learned all my hard lessons about how to fail and how to not be a great entrepreneur and how to waste people's money. And, I did everything the wrong way, like you do your first time. And so I went back in-house because I did the marketing part pretty well. I just wasn't a great product operator, and eventually ran the marketing departments for early stage startups. And at some point kind of got tired of the early stage work all day, all night, high pressure. But when you're not the owner of the company, the sort of compensation and equity component, like the balance just ran out for me as I got a little older, got married, had a kid. And so I decided to go and be independent and move more towards a service-based business, which led me into marketing consulting for early and growth stage companies. And out of that, I spun the MarTech podcast, and that's really where I'm focused now.
2 questions on that.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on the whole failing is a rite of passage as an entrepreneur?
I mean, I'd like to avoid it if you
Right.
can. You don't try to fail, but I think that it's unrealistic to expect that you can launch a company and only be successful. Like, life just never works that way. And I think the best entrepreneurs are the ones that are able to accept the things that they've done wrong, not take it personally, and be able to evaluate them as a data point and course correct.
Yeah.
So, I guess I would say I'm pro failure as much as I try to avoid it. But,
Yeah.
Just got to fail and move on.
It's just interesting because it seems as though most people will say, you got to get your first failure out of the way, right? And it's just like, okay, but surely as a society with the information that's out there and that's prevalent, like there has to be a way where we can have micro failures, right? Where there's kind of a learning process, but it's not an utter sheer disaster failure.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Look, first time founder, second time founder, third time failure, the odds are stacked against you, right?
Sure.
Like, there's a lot of startups that are just going to fail.
Yeah.
And it's, right person, right place, right time. It's kind of like a dating metaphor, but that works the same thing in startups.
Yeah.
There's market conditions that you can't necessarily influence or dictate. You just got to roll with the punches and mitigate as much risk. And a lot of that goes into sort of my philosophy in marketing, is how you can learn as much as you can and pivot and course correct. So when you fail, it's not a disaster. It is a micro failure and then a course correction.
Right. Well, it's interesting because I just had a guest come on the show, I guess within the last month. And it's fascinating because her and her husband decided to launch this like alternative school, essentially. I was joking around saying it was like Professor X School for the Gifted, but it's essentially a school for children of entrepreneurs that like think that their kids want to be entrepreneurs too. Yeah. Right. Which I think that has some dangerous complexities to it. I think there's a possibility that you could be like vicariously living through your kid or like forcing them down a path, right? It's like the baseball parent that like is like, you're going to be the next Cy Young, right? When they're 7 years old. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I think no.
I have a child who's 2.5 years old, and it's really hard to figure out what is you developing their personality as opposed to you trying to teach life lessons, but handing down your traits.
But it has to be such a tough balance, right? Because there's so much that I know now about wealth and owning your time and financial freedom and all these various things, that there's nothing wrong with being in a 9-to-5, but the things that I know, I would want to really push that on my child and be like, this is what you're going to do, because these are the things that you can accomplish, and the pros outweigh the cons if you can handle the risk and you have an innovative and a creative mind and so on. Anyways, but what I think was fascinating about that is that it allows them in relation to this school I was talking about, it gives them the opportunity to make those mistakes, theoretically speaking, prior to the point that they're in their 20s, in the real world, trying to do something brand new for the first time, right? Like they're encouraged to start businesses when they're like 7 to 10 years old, right? Yeah. So one would surmise that it's possible that you could experience those micro failures so that you kind of run out of the gates when you do graduate and you're off in the real world.
I'll play devil's advocate.
Okay.
I think failing in your 20s is great.
Sure.
And that's the right time to take risks and fail in your career and bottom out and land on your face.
Yeah.
Right. Because there's the mental side of it where you are developing or developed enough as a person to understand how you deal with the failure. And some people are 9-to-5 people.
Yeah.
The love of my life, my wife, gets up and she goes to work for a big company, right? And TPS reports or whatever it is they do there. Like it's foreign to me now. I've been out of the big company game for a long time, but like she had to go through failures and course corrections in her career, and I did the same in mine. And understanding how that impacts you helps you figure out what's the right balance for you. And so as you're developing your sense of self, and I'm going to screw up the type of brain and all this stuff. I'm not a psychologist, but like maybe your cerebral cortex or your frontal lobe or something isn't developed till you're around 25.
No. That's right. Your frontal lobe is not developed until you're like 25.
So you're 25 and you kind of have a true understanding of who you are around that time frame.
Sure.
So it's good to experiment and test and feel how those things when you are essentially an adult mentally, so you can understand what's the right path for you.
Well, and I'll use an analogy for that, because I agree with what you're saying totally. I was just throwing like kind of a theoretical there, but my theory as it relates to why Tiger Woods had the personal implosion that he did, right? Mm-hmm. Being completely outside, knowing nothing about the situation on an intimate level, is partially maybe due to the fact that from the time he was 3 years old on Johnny Carson, it was, he's going to be a pro golfer and the best that ever lived kind of thing. Right. And that was he was forced down that path to where he couldn't make mistakes. And thus I feel like it was somewhat led to an implosion. Now there are a lot of variables and a lot of other things that are possibly at play. That is an oversimplification probably of a very complex situation, but I would say that is definitely a contributing factor, if nothing else.
I don't think you're off the reservation. I think there's a couple other examples that I'm a big football fan. Todd Marinovich was like the robo quarterback at USC when I was
perfect example.
You know, and he was born to be a quarterback according to his dad, and he bottomed out and had substance problems. And you look at a bunch of the child actors and actresses, like they start their career so early before their sense of self is developed.
Right.
You know, I don't think it's an accident that a lot of the people that are in the spotlight and focused on one specific trend early on run into these personal development issues later in life. And again, it's you said this too, it's a broad stereotype. I'm sure there's some people that are perfectly well balanced that were athletes and actors as a kid, but it's just probably more rare.
Yeah, it's just tough. Where do you draw the line between augmenting the human experience and then flat out just trying to hack the human experience beyond natural means, right?
Yeah, that's above my pay grade to answer that question.
Anyways, I always like jumping into some theoreticals. I appreciate you going there with me. So this is an issue that I see a lot when it comes to marketing. Let's get on the marketing track.
Sure.
So they're early, right? They don't necessarily know who they're going to serve or who's going to resonate with what they're still figuring things out. Now, maybe it's not wholly true for service-based businesses, right? Like I had a service-based business in my first company, and it was so much easier because it was like, we knew who needed our service. It was cut and dry. It was very obvious, right? Now there's more shades of gray. You don't really know, specifically in the online space, because you don't have that face-to-face interaction. I've talked about this a lot in the show. So how do you normally recommend people go about developing a brand before they really know who their ideal client avatar really is at that point?
I'm going to give you a short answer, then I'm going to give you a long answer.
Okay.
Talk to them.
Okay.
Right.
Talk to them, meaning just anybody, to figure out who those people are, right? Because I'm assuming that you don't even know. They could be 18, they could be 65. You have no idea at that point. That's what I'm assuming.
That's the short answer.
Okay.
The long answer is there's a process to reconcile what you think about your company and the people that are inside working to solve the problem and building the identity of the organization.
Okay.
Right? Because a company is a collection of people trying to build this unified identity. Mm-hmm. So you got to figure out who's working in the company and what they think about who and what you want to be to make sure that it resonates, and you build this corporate identity and let it reflect itself outward. And then you have to think about the people that are hypothetically in your target market. And you could talk to them about what their pain points are, and how they think about solving the problem, and where they go to look for solutions, and when they want to be presented with marketing. And you come up with the overlap between those two, let's call them constituents. Mm-hmm. And that's really where your brand is developed. And it's an iterative process over time. It's one of the things is, as I moved away from working for startups and started being an independent marketing consultant, I'll be honest, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And friends that I had worked with before, when I said, hey, I'm going to do some marketing consulting, because I was in between like my last job and whatever the heck I was going to do next. It's been almost 4 years now. I'm still trying to figure out what that next thing is. People come in and say, hey, just help us with marketing. We don't know what we're doing.
Okay.
Okay, well, just come in and get comfortable and talk to some of the people around here about what they think. And then we got some customers, or this is who we think are customers. Just help us figure it out. You're a marketer. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up in that situation a couple times where, because I had these relationships, people would bring me into the company and just say, I don't know, go help us, figure it out. And I started to develop this process of interviewing the internal constituents, the people that are in the company, and asking them questions about, what does the company do? What are your products? What's the problem you're solving? Who are you serving? Why is your product the best? Where do people want to hear about your company? What's the message you're trying to get across? What is your brand identity? Mm-hmm. And what I found was there was all of these 10 different responses from 10 people, but there was these overlapping portions of each answer.
Okay.
Right. People would give overly complicated answers, and you could distill that down. And that was what is my job as a marketing consultant, to take all of those inputs and distill it down to, you are all fundamentally saying these three things about who you are, what your company does, why you do it, and why you add value to the universe. Separate conversations. You go and you talk to all of the people that you think are going to be your target market, and you say, tell me about the problems that you have related to the general area that this company works. And you get a sense after talking to 10 of them whether they're going to be a fit and what their pain points are. And they always tell you the answers. Whenever and I could go through a couple examples if you want them, when you interview people that are, relevant to your company's target, they will tell you what their pain points are. They will tell you where they want to have that be marketed to, how they want to be marketed to, the type of content, the solutions, the differentiations. They give you all of the answers if you just go talk to them. Okay.
Follow up to that question. Where do you usually go? And this is obviously maybe contingent upon whether this is a B2B play or a B2C play. I'm more inclined to go with the Ryan Deiss methodology of H to H. It doesn't matter, human to human, right? Mm-hmm. But where would you say is a usual source point for you to locate and identify where these people hang out or reside so that you can have these relevant conversations?
Well, on the internal side, meeting the company, they're generally at the office.
Sure.
Right? You go and you try to do the face-to-face as much as you can.
Right.
I interview them. And maybe that's just because that is, a skill set I feel like is strong for me, the ability to communicate and get information out of people and ask questions that are not complicated and get simple answers that are effective.
But you're talking about potential customers that you interview.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. Where do you find those people to then interview? Where's your source point usually for those?
It depends on the brand and on the business. Give me an example. I'll tell you how I'd go about and get them.
Okay. I think we have a lot of people that sell info products, right? Mm-hmm. So you're selling a new course on teaching people how to get your next 10,000. I see Lewis Howes advertises all the time. Get your next 10,000 followers on Instagram, right? Mm-hmm. And he's marketing to people that are trying to establish an online brand to sell you have a lifestyle business, sell information products. Where would you find those people to have those relevant conversations, interview them?
So you're looking for people that are trying to build a presence on Instagram. Mm-hmm. They are marketing themselves already on Instagram.
Right.
So I'm sure that there's a million tools that will build you Instagram influencer lists. I would look where they're already promoting themselves, probably the micro influencer programs, and go find their accounts and send them a direct message saying, we are reaching out to influencers that are in their growth phase, looking to scale from 10,000 to 100,000 to understand some of the problems they have, because we're building a product that supports their growth and businesses. Do you have half an hour to talk? I'd love to tell you about our product and hear about how you're thinking about the space.
Okay. Now, the objection to that is going to be, for many people, is going to be, I get blown up with DMs every single day. What the hell is going to make your DM stand out above others? So do you have some kind of incentive with the people that you interview as it relates to why they would come give you that time, that 30 minutes, or is it just a sheer numbers game?
It's not even a numbers game. I'm thinking back about a brand project I did. The first one I did, a company that I worked for 3 years. They're Search Metrics, and they are an SEO platform, right? So they're building tools for marketers that are trying to optimize their presence in Google. And, we were looking initially when we were trying to figure out how to position their brand for SEO experts. I'm sure SEOs get solicited by companies brands and solutions, right? There's a million SEO toolkit products out there.
Yeah.
I sent
Say
an
the least.
email to, I think it was 250 SEOs.
Okay.
I had to go build a list. I used a researcher or a tool or something like that to go build a list. It was a personal email. That's a big thing. If you're sending it from a personal account, it's different than when it's from a marketing account. So if the message is, my name's Ben, I am the head of marketing at Influencer Net product or whatever, the brand is. And I'm doing research to try to figure out how to make a product relevant to people like you. I'd love to talk for half an hour just to gauge your thoughts on the space.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a link to block off time. I mean, I sent for Search Metrics, sent people a survey that was like a 10-minute survey.
Mm-hmm.
And we got something like a 10% conversion rate. So the 250 people I sent the survey to, we got 25 responses of people that were spending 10 to 15 minutes on a survey.
Interesting.
That's a long survey. I never thought we would actually get that many responses. If you reach out personally, people are always generally willing to give their time. If you reach out from a corporate account, it feels like marketing and spam and research. So just be personal about it.
No, I definitely agree with that. All right. So this is something I've recommended to people. I want to hear if you give a yay or nay on this. One of the things I recommended in any market, right? In any industry, this could theoretically work. Join either Facebook or LinkedIn groups that are kind of geared around that specific industry, right? So I'll give you an example. We were launching a podcast, basically like a podcast course, but it was around like how to actually turn into a business, right? Or to build a business around a podcast, not necessarily to turn your podcast into a business, which I think are inherently different, by the way. But to go in there and just literally listen and watch the conversations that, like the podcast one that I'm talking about, for example, the same damn 7 questions are asked over and over and over and over. Like I see those, what you said, those commonalities, those core things that are being asked, the pain points. And so I knew those are things I need to intertwine into my info product, where the things that are being asked the most, because I knew from a marketing standpoint, I get to turn that around, maybe advertise to those people. And I know those are the questions that they have, right? That they want to learn more about. So do you think lurking in Facebook groups, LinkedIn groups, or any kind of online private group, or even just online on social media in general, lurking to see the conversations that are being had as it relates to your space is a good idea?
Doesn't seem like a bad idea, right?
Okay.
It's a data point. Like at the end of the day, what matters is that you're learning as much about the target market that you're addressing, and you're pivoting your messaging to be a true reflection of your company, but relevant to the pain points that they have. And so whether you're taking survey data or human to human, the interviews, or you're reading forums, right? The medium doesn't matter. It's a great idea.
Sure.
I would actually take it one step further. And, if you're going to be there and you're going to be in the forums and you're going to be, instead of lurking, be active.
Sure.
Start building a presence.
And I think that's even better. Yeah.
And reach out and then turn I see you had this question on the forum, and do that as you're recruiting, to have those 10 real interviews where you can go deep and learn more about the psychology. And to me, the reason why like the human to human conversations are interesting is you can pivot the conversation based on what the input is, right? Mm-hmm. As somebody goes in depth and has a strong feeling, you can ask them why. Or when somebody says something different than the rest of the group, you can follow up. As opposed to a survey, you just get the snapshot in time and the sort of very filtered view. So you don't get that dynamic data that you would if you were in real time. You get to use almost all of your senses to understand who you're trying to reach. Yeah.
Well, I like the engaging aspect with them, because like you said, you are at that point building that relationship, which I think is imperative to getting them on a conversation with you, right? Because sometimes if it's cold, they're just not going to do that because it's saturated, right? So if it doesn't come for you, or if it's not a built relationship, I think it does present more of a challenge.
One of the biggest tips in marketing that I could provide is, and whether you're doing the brand development or marketing strategy or operations, you have to go where the customers already are.
Sure.
Right. You have to go where they're looking for your products and services. And so, when you're doing brand development, if there are people that are talking about the problem that they're having in a forum, go there. Right. If they're on Instagram, great. Have a presence in Instagram. If you're trying to market to them and they're looking for health and beauty products, well, they're looking for them on Instagram. Right.
Yeah.
Or you have to have a website, or be in a storefront.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what you're doing in marketing. You have to have a sense of where people are looking for your services.
Totally. Now, we're actually reading The Power of Habit in my book club community right now. And one of the examples I thought was really fascinating was they talked about Procter & Gamble when they had their FREEBIES project, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you've read the book or not. I'll give you kind of, okay. So essentially what happened is that when they launched FREEBIES, their idea of what the target audience or who those people would be was basically built around a premise of one person. Mm-hmm. They talked to a lot of people, but it was based on this one particular individual. And this lady worked at a national or state park, and she was around skunks a lot, right? And so she was getting hosed and stinky in her clothes, and it would come home and it'd be on her sofa and like all of her everything, right? Mm-hmm. So it was really affecting her personal life because she'd go on dates, and the minute somebody caught a whiff of skunk, all of a sudden they just kind of ghosted her or didn't want to, have another date or whatever. And so she was kind of like ashamed and embarrassed and all these various things. So when they went and actually did their interview, right, like you're talking about, the Procter & Gamble, the guys, they were in charge of the FREEBIES project, went and spoke with her. She broke down and started crying. Like she was one of the sample, like test beta users of FREEBIES. Mm-hmm. She was like, this product has changed my life. I've been able to have dates. The skunk smell is gone. I'm able to do this and that. They took that back and built an entire marketing campaign around that one person's response, mm-hmm. right? And then what they realized is that there's other people like cat ladies or, people that they've become so accustomed to the smell that lives inside of their home that they don't foresee it or envision as a problem, right? But again, they almost scrapped the project entirely based on this one person. So here's my question. When do you know that you have enough of a sample size, right, from the conversations that you've had to know this is truly the right message, or this is truly the right marketing angle, or this is truly the right demographic, or whatever the case may be, or when you still need to keep digging because you're like, you know what? Yes, in this extreme example, this was the case, but I don't know if there's enough yet to find some commonality, because if Procter & Gamble can screw that up, little startups are going to screw that up big time.
Yeah. I mean, it's always a work in progress. And, I think that there's some foundational stuff that doesn't change, which is about the mission the company is trying to accomplish. You're always learning about your customers, and you get different inputs over time. And you're looking initially, I do this survey process or this interview process, and generally I do about 10 interviews, and I'll stop when they start feeling like all I'm getting is the same data. Okay, I've done 10 of these and the last 3 said the same thing. I'm not hearing anything new. I don't need to go any further. Right? That problem is universal. And if it's like, you know what? I really don't feel like I have a good understanding of who the customer base is. I need to bring in more people and until I see common themes.
Okay.
You're never going to get it 100%. And then, you're going to go out and roll out a hypothesis or a test. And you have a hypothesis, you roll out your test, and you're going to get more data, and you're going to pivot and iterate. Your brand message doesn't stay the same forever. Yeah. And, you look at every company on the planet, always Coca-Cola, like that's not like they started with always Coca-Cola.
Right.
Tagline now.
Yeah.
You're always taking in different inputs, and you're changing the message based on the channel and who your target and your segmentation.
Right.
So that process is never done.
Yeah. I just think it's so much harder for startups. And this is where I see a lot of pivoting, right? Because they go out and they can't validate the offering, right? Or they think they haven't validated the offer. Whereas if you look at somebody like Coke, like they may already had proof of concept. Now it's just a matter of getting the offer right. Right. So I guess that's trying to articulate this, but I think that's the thing a lot of people struggle with is, well, clearly the offer's wrong, when it could just be they haven't done enough of digging on the marketing side, right? And it's really, I think, difficult to understand when you've accomplished which.
There's a balance of this sort of foundational work of like identity. And by identity, I don't mean a logo and a tagline.
Sure.
Right? By identity, I mean, what are you trying to accomplish?
Right.
Who are you trying to serve?
Right.
Right. Like, why are you doing this? The really foundational stuff of like why the company exists. Mm-hmm. And how you make money and what your products are. And, there's that sort of core work. And then there's the marketing strategy and implementation.
Yeah.
And, when you start getting more data, when you start going to market, right, you build your understanding of who you are and who your customers are and figure out where the overlap is. And through that process, you should get an understanding of our customers are saying they want this product and they want to hear about it here. And you should be asking them those questions. Mm-hmm. you are a podcaster and you are trying to figure out how to create a podcast and monetize it. What do you want to know? Is it what tools? Is it what type of content? Is it, where to find sponsors? Is it how to retain sponsors? Like, tell me about the problem that you think you have.
Right.
And tell me about where you would look to solve this problem. Would you go to YouTube? Are you looking for a book? Do you want it through social media? Do you want to listen to it in a podcast? And when you're asking them all these questions in real time, they'll give you the answers. Then you got to go figure out if you can cultivate that marketing channel. And that's like key tip number 2, I guess, is you have to understand the time and effort it takes to cultivate a marketing channel. A lot of what I see with early stage startups is I know who I am and I have a good understanding of my customers and I did my homework and they said Facebook. Yeah. Okay, I ran $100 of Facebook ads and it didn't work. I'm screwed. Now, Facebook is a $10,000 3-month channel for an operator that knows what they're doing.
Yes.
So you got to be realistic about the effort and the time it takes because those are competitive channels, right? That's
what I'm getting at, though, is that there's too many people that are walking the plank and taking the jump and taking the leap when it's like, dude, you haven't given this a realistic amount of time of testing and tweaking and reiterating.
That's one of the reasons I left being an operator in the startup world is the expectations that I would see from founders were, go be a magic man and a rainmaker, and I'm going to give you 1/3 of the budget you need and 1/4 of the time. And I want you to build me Uber.
It's ridiculous.
It's like, okay, but that's just not how the world works. Like, it's a 3-month channel and it's a $10,000 channel.
Yes.
I need 10 grand in 3 months. And if you want me to do it faster, then I need more money or more resources. And if you want me to do it cheaper, then I need more time.
Yes. So it's funny. I have a story on that you'll really find humorous. I'm involved with a startup and, they have big, ambitious goals, right? Not like Uber status, but close, right? Like big, ambitious goals.
They want to be a unicorn.
They want to be a unicorn. Absolutely. So the nationwide Facebook or I'm sorry, all marketing, right? Not even just Facebook, the budget that they allocated based off of their initial pre-seed raise of $500,000. Guess how much they were allocating for me to help them with their marketing nationwide for the entire year. How much do you think for what, a month?
Yeah.
25,000 for all 12 months for the entire year, nationwide campaign. I'm like, we're going to get, we need that monthly. Well, realistically,
the truth is that you don't, but you have to have an understanding with the founder of if you have $25,000 in a year, that $25,000 goes to me.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to work for $2,500,
sure,
$2,000 a month, right? Like,
sure.
That's not a lot of money for me to invest a lot of time.
Sure.
But then we're focused on organic growth. And the reality of organic growth is it goes slowly and builds over time. Yeah. So we can build a content strategy and I can go write a blog post for you a month, 10 blog posts for you a month for $2,000. And in 6 months, you're going to start getting some signals, whether your content marketing strategy, 3 to 6 months, you're going to get signals of whether that content strategy is working because you're going to have 20 to 50, whatever the math is, blog posts.
Yeah.
You got to hire a great writer. But if you're only going to give me 25 grand, I got to write the content myself. I can only put in this much time.
Yeah.
You got to be patient.
Well, thank goodness I'm an advisor with an equity position and not the one doing the work, because that's asking, like you said, that's asking for miracles, So anyways, it's just interesting because I see that a lot with founders and you mentioned it. So I thought it was something to reiterate is like, not only does it take time, but it ends up taking way more money than you think.
In fairness, how many founders are marketers? They're there, but a lot of them don't understand. They think marketing is this, I just got to find the right guy who can just turn marketing on and then it's done. And it's marketing is cultivated. It is like growing a plant.
Yeah.
Dirt, water, food, seeds, all that stuff, and then time to grow. And the more that you put those things in, you can get these great results. And sometimes, look, you're facing market conditions. If you're trying to grow plants in a frozen part of Alaska, it's going to be more of a struggle.
Yeah.
That's just reality.
Yeah, it is reality. Cool. So you've got this information, you've gathered, you've done your interviews, right? Mm-hmm. You've got enough of a sample size. You feel like, hey, like we really found these commonalities, these overlapping pain points and so on and so forth. One of the things that you mentioned, I think is really important is not just marketing, but also the branding aspect of that too. So what do you normally do, or what do you advise the companies that you work with do, or the companies you used to work with that you do, to take that information and then augment the brand and even potentially change the culture? I think T-Mobile is probably a good example of that. Like really change the entire culture of their company based off of who their target demographic was and based off what those people wanted, right? Or what they valued. So what do you recommend in terms of the back and forth between here's what we're discovering and here's how the brand is going to be augmented as a result of that, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a place where you can be iterative. And when you say the brand, now I'm thinking about logo, iconography,
Sure.
imagery, right? Like now you're talking about how you're visually going to represent yourself.
Sure.
And I actually am an advocate of that being really cheap at first. Like the MarTech the MarTech podcast brand, the logo was $30 on Fiverr. You know, like, and I've been working on the project for 15 months, and at some point we'll update the logo and
right.
You know, sexy it up.
Right.
But it was good enough to launch the product, and it wasn't getting in the way. And so I think you can be scrappy and, you know, creative with how you're building identity, and you have to be smart about it. You have to understand what your customers are looking for. You have to understand, you know, what resonates and understand who they are to try to figure out what brand is going to resonate. And that, a lot of that is like, you need some reps. You know, it's like, and if you've done it and you have somebody that's got some experience, they can do a brand, build a brand on a logo, right? Build an identity on a logo.
Sure.
Rephrase that. You can build a brand on a logo. The identity is build a brand on a budget, build an identity. You got to put in the work and do the foundational research.
Sure. And I think that was more of what I was talking about, was the more of the identity aspect versus just like the aesthetics of your logo per se.
Yeah. I mean, there's no shortcuts to understanding who the people are and what their problems are. But once you've nailed that, when you truly have spent the time, and sometimes it's not a lot of time, honestly, most of the time it's 10 interviews.
Interesting.
To really understand this group of people, when you find the right person, you interview them, you come up with these common themes, you have enough to be able to go on. You can go build a logo on the cheap. You can go Fiverr it, Upwork it, you know, crowdsource it, call in favors, friends, and go build something cheap and get it up there. Use your WordPress, your Squarespace to, you know, build your website, build a presence, and then, you know, start running your marketing tests, and then you're into channel validation before you have to spend a ton of budget.
Totally. Interesting. All right. So I know one of the things you told me before we started recording here today was that you're not a fan of big data. So I've had some guests on as recently as the past few weeks that have come on and basically gave the advice of, hey, there are firms out there that you can go pay $2,500 to, and they'll give you loads of data. Tell me why you wouldn't do that.
What's the quality of that data? Loads of data is irrelevant if it's not clean data.
Right.
So like I can go, you know, give you 1 million pixels. It doesn't mean that you're able to put them in the right order to make a beautiful image.
Sure.
Right. Lots of data, big data, tons of data is useless unless it's accurate, unless you know how to put it together to make conclusions. I actually don't want big data. I want accurate small bits of data so I can get a quick learning, test something, and get more data.
Interesting.
Right. And I am of the mindset of you have to figure out if there is I'll use CPA, a marketing term, cost per acquisition.
Yeah.
Before you work about your cost per acquisition as a marketer, you have to figure out if there is an acquisition.
Sure.
Right. Like you need to understand if there is a signal in the noise. And so I think a lot of companies think, I have to collect all of this data and get all of these signals. And all they do is overwhelm themselves instead of focusing on the 1 to 3 metrics that actually matter when you're first starting out.
Sure. Well, do you think it kind of likens back to the analogy that we were using before about people skipping the steps in their 20s and not having that fit, like what you learn throughout that process, right? Do you think that a lot of it ties into what you learn and what you glean from people actually having those interactive conversations, face-to-face interaction or intimate conversations with people about what they like, what their pain points are, all those various things, versus just being given this big lump of data and not really knowing or going through having that experience of having those real conversations with people? Would you liken it as a similar analogy to that?
Yeah, I mean, you're collecting data, whether it's quantitative or qualitative.
Sure.
Right. So let me just I am pro data.
Yes.
And I'm pro data-driven marketing.
Yes.
And I think the term big data gets thrown around like I need every possible variable to be
I
tracked,
see.
and I need it all in the same place so I can do these crazy sophisticated analysis. By the way, are you a mathematician? Are you a statistician? No. So you're not going to be able to
Yeah.
run regressions, and you have all this data, and now you're just sitting on a pile of expensive data, and you burn $2,500 when all you're trying to figure out is if Facebook works. It's like, just go look at Google Analytics and figure out what your CPA is.
Yeah.
I truly like the definition of big data, like the companies that are using big data, you can probably say on one hand, it's Facebook, Google, Twitter, Amazon, like, I don't know, Netflix, or, all the FANG stocks. Like, those are companies that are doing machine learning and marketing,
stuff that you can't afford as a startup entrepreneur.
No, and they're hiring like data scientists from MIT to actually look at these massive data sets.
Yeah.
If you're running a marketing department and you're like sitting there and trying to figure out what to do, go talk to your customers, figure out what the pain point is. They'll tell you what their biggest problem with your product is, and go run a test to see if you could solve it and see if your business performance is better. It's probably better than spending your money on data that you don't know how to analyze. And so I'm not anti big data. It's just analyzing truly big data. You have to be a big data organization.
Yeah. No, it makes total sense. Okay. So the next question that I had, and this is one I've been really personally struggling with. So I hope that other people, well, I hope, and I don't hope that they're struggling with this, but I hope that they are, so you can help them.
Let's do this.
So I've talked to a lot of marketing gurus. I probably most notably, Ray Edwards came on my show a couple months ago to talk about copy, right? He's the copyright guy, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things he told me that the biggest mistakes that people make, for those that didn't catch that episode, was that people will literally take the advice or the examples that he gives, right? He has a formulaic approach to how he puts together copy, whether it's ad copy, whether it's sales letter copy. Primarily, his book is focused on sales letter copy, right? So they'll take that and they literally just formulaically just plug it in and just kind of mix the words around. So here's the thing. I've worked with ad strategists. I've paid a crap ton of money to go work with a lot of them, and we've seen results. But here's where I've struggled is, how do I take the formula, which they have put a lot of work into and have proven from a psychological standpoint that it does indeed work, right? There's just a way that we process information that it works, right? There's science behind the madness to what they do. While also not sounding in my marketing message like being ridiculously robotic and formulaic, and also sounding and having some form of authenticity in what I'm putting together as far as my own marketing message. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'll preface this with I'm not the world's best copywriter.
Okay.
So, take it with a grain of salt. You do not want me. I actually think I'm a decent copywriter. I have terrible grammar. So everything that I write has to be edited by somebody else. Like,
I got you. I'm tracking.
Emailed back and forth a couple of times. You'll see that I'm just going to like type it and send it and not.
Yeah. Gotcha.
That's honestly why I do podcasts, not blogging. I think the lesson with marketing copy that people get caught up is they're trying to sound fancy. And you go to a party and you meet somebody, you could tell instantly when they are trying to impress you as opposed to being their authentic self. And so when you're putting your copy together, sure, there is a formula about, how to organize your thoughts and get them to the right, get them to sing and hum. I'll use a resume example. You want to put an action word first when you're writing a resume bullet, because you want the person that's reading your resume to think that you are action oriented, so they know that you will be a doer.
Right.
And so, on his resume bullet, managed X, Y, and Z, and then you end with drove results. And that helps people to think that like you did this thing that drove this result, you get results, right? There's a way to write copy and a formula that you can follow. If you try to sound fancy and you make things more complicated than they need to be, people are going to be more confused than you want them to be.
Yeah.
I use this with titling of the podcast. Whenever I advise someone about making a media property, making a podcast, building a content business, call it what it is.
Yeah.
Right. I could have called my podcast the Ben Shapiro Hour. I could have called it, fuzzy purple widgets, marketing tools for geniuses. I called it the MarTech podcast because it describes what the thing is. And there's some keyword optimization and keyword stuffing that we did in the title. But like when people read it in 1 second, you're giving them 1 second of information. If you ask them to take 2 seconds to read it, they're going to be like, that was a wasted second of my time. Not interested. You're wasting my time. Be as clear and as straightforward as you possibly can. Don't make it complicated. There's no need.
Yeah. I love that advice because I do think there's a lot of people, you read their copy, and I think some people actually turn people off when they're trying to sound too fancy, right? People read it and it just, I think now people have become too sophisticated. They can spot that BS from a mile away when they read it. It's just like, this is clearly just a rinse and repeat somebody else's formula that you put in there, and you're just plugging in all these things to make you boost yourself up or make yourself look like you're something that maybe you're not even.
The one that drives me nuts is like the B2B enterprise brands, where every B2B enterprise brand now needs machine learning, AI, data science.
The buzzwords.
Right, like it's just like word salad. And it's like, oh, you're a CRM.
Yeah.
Well, okay, just say we're the
just say you're a CRM.
CRM.
Yeah.
You know, like you don't have to include all those other things in your description.
No, totally. To that point, it's really interesting. I'm involved with Founder Institute. I'm one of the entrepreneur residencies with Founder Institute. And one of the things that we tell people is exactly what you just said when they're practicing their pitch. The first inclination they have when they get up there and practice their 60-second elevator pitch is to basically drop all of the buzzwords that they can to sound like this thing is really important and really special. And people, 9 times out of 10, they do exactly what you just said. The mentors afterwards say, okay, but what are you? Right. And they'll say, well, it's a CRM. They say, just say that. Right. Say you're a CRM and say why it's important and how it's different. Right. And why it's better or whatever. Right.
That's a maturity. That's a maturity thing, right? I
think so.
Going back to the failure thing is like, I screwed this up 3 times. Nobody understood what I was talking about when I was describing the company. Maybe I just call it what it is. And
yeah,
it's a learned lesson.
Yeah. But do you think that people do that though, because they feel like they're in a competitive marketplace and they feel like they have to stand out? Right. Or does it come from some other like deeper psychological issue where they're trying to prove themselves or, because I think it's real. I think there's a lot of people that they're startups and they're playing with big players. Right. And it's like, how do we differentiate ourselves from what they are with so many customers that they serve? How are we better or different enough for people to want to do business with us instead? Right. So I think it comes from a place of maybe fear. I don't know.
I think that there's probably a need to sound fancy because you want to impress the people in the room as part of it.
Sure.
And a little bit of it is, we're talking about a metaphorical person presenting, but the lack of understanding of the problem they're trying to solve.
Yeah.
It's like if I'm a CRM and I know that there's 1,000 other CRMs and I'm trying to get a venture capitalist to invest in my company, I need to make it different than every other product because why would they invest in me if there's 1 million of them?
Totally.
So instead of saying, I've done my research on the people that are using CRMs, and this is the biggest pain point for them, there is an underserved need in the small to medium size business CRMs, and these are the problems that they have. So we built this solution, as opposed to we have a machine learning AI equipped CRM that automates the process of customer management relationship.
Yeah.
Nobody knows what that means.
But to your earlier point though, if you haven't had those real conversations and done that marketing deep dive work, you start throwing in buzzwords because you don't truly know what people want or what the solution they're looking for is. And so you're kind of forced to use those. You might be. You might be. Right.
That might be secrets. You might need machine learning and you might have an MIT data science and big data to be able to use it. And if you do, great. That's going to be an expensive business to invest in. Those things aren't cheap.
Yeah.
But you don't have to say those things. You just have to be solving a need for a group of people that's large enough to create a big business. And that's, investment 101, how big is the target market? How big is the pain point? What can you sell it for?
Right. Totally. Well, dude, I've thrown a lot of really complex questions at you. I appreciate you spending the entire hour with me here today. For people that want to learn more about you, your work, or if they want to listen to your podcast, where can they go to discover all those things?
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on the show. I love your work. I think you're a great podcast host. So before I get into my stuff, thank you for having me on the show. I've enjoyed the entire conversation. To find me, the biggest thing I'm doing these days is the MarTech podcast, MarTech. So you can go to martechpod.com. You could search MarTech in pretty much any app store, and we're going to be the first listing. It's the blue and green logo with an M on it. And it's a daily show that we talk about all sorts of different marketing topics, career development for marketers, we interview subject matter experts. We've had high profile guests like Gary Briggs, who's the former CMO of Facebook. We had the head of product at MailChimp, and down to people that are, operators that are running Facebook ads, talking about sort of the geeky technical stuff. So if you're interested in marketing and technology, that's really my core gig these days. Ben J. Shap, BenJShap.com is my consulting website. Got some personal stuff on there, and just Google Ben J. Shap and you'll find me.
And if you land on the Daily Wire, you're not in the right place.
Yeah, I'm a different guy. I'm taller than him. He just stole my name.
Cool, guys. All those links will be included, so you can browse on over and check that out. Benjamin, thank you for joining us today, and all the best, my friend.
Enjoyed it. Have a great one.
See you, buddy.